Hello and welcome to the Danger Zone, everybody. This is your host, Lance Danger. Well, this is my 25th YouTube video, and it only took me 6 years to get there. Hoorah! Yes, but enough patting myself on the back for that achievement. Right now, I'd like to talk more from the heart and speak about what really motivated me to do comics. Or in other words, really the comics that influenced me the most, that made me want to do comics. And so I thought I'd share with you guys the 6 comics that influenced me to do Fred Peterson, the Mighty Warlord. At number 6, it would have to definitely be the Archie Double Digest. Those things were pretty huge, and they still are. They still sell them. But I basically learned how to read with those digests when I was little. Before I was even in kindergarten, I already knew quite a few words and put together some sentences because I just loved those things. I would always make my mom or my dad buy them at the time. I remember there was this grocery store next to a train stop close to the apartment building where we lived. And in that grocery store, there was a huge wall of just comics. You know, and it had the G.I. Joes, it had the Muppet Babies, it had all that good stuff. But I was really drawn to Archie because of just the cartoony style of it, and you know, it's classic Americana, you know, from the 50s. It's Archie, the original comic book player. Number 5, it's The Fly. The Fly from Impact Comics, you know, it was drawn by Mike Parelbeck, who unfortunately died way before his time, I consider. He was really one of the best artists out there, and it's a shame that he passed away during a time where he was getting the most recognition for his work, when he eventually took over the penciling duties for the Batman, the animated series comic book adaptation, which was pretty awesome. But the one that really stuck in my mind since always has been The Fly. I have the entire run of that comic book series. It's like 17 issues if I'm not mistaken, and an annual, and I reread it all the time. It was just such a fun story, and Mike Parelbeck's art really reflected that story really well. It was a great combination of good solid storytelling combined with great artwork, great characters that were relatable to. It was just a great comic book, and it was one that made me start to draw and doodle a little bit, which is always fun. I really used to imitate Mike Parelbeck's style very early on because I started drawing at a late age. I really started drawing when I was like 12 or 13, which is late by comparison next to other artists that start pretty much since there were 3 with the crayons and the paper and whatever. But really, it was Mike Parelbeck's art, you know, before the Humberto Ramos, before the Joe Madureiras, before the J. Scott Campbells. He was doing his cartoony style, semi-manga-ish anime style with the big eyes also. And in a way, he was really ahead of his time and a very solid artist, especially in his storytelling abilities. Coming in at number 4, it's The Batman. Yeah, Batman. As I grew older and I grew out of my Archie phase and Muppet Babies phase and G.I. Joe, and started to mature a little bit in my taste, Batman was the comic that led me into that more teen adult comic book stories. I mean, ever since I was little, I loved Batman because of the Adam West, Burt Ward series from the 50s, 60s. It was one of those series where, you know, when you're little and you go to school, like the next day, you're talking about the show with all your friends, and you're like, whoa, did you see that last episode? Like, yeah, that King Tut is insane. Or like, man, did you see the Green Hornet? He was kicking ass. Hey, did you know Kato was Bruce Lee? Oh yeah, it kicked that much ass. But I digress. As I grew older and I saw the first Batman movie from Tim Burton in the movie theaters, I was blown away by it. The darkness, how gothic it really looked, how different everything was from the actual series from the 60s. I was actually expecting something kind of like that, you know. Even in my mind, when I grew up watching movies like The Shining and The One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, I was really thinking like, wow, I wonder how Jack Nicholson is going to do this very campy or something, you know? Wow. So my mind was just blown away when I saw the Tim Burton version, even though like every other kid in the theater, we were wondering, where's Robin? But, you know, it's all good, and that led me into buying the actual comic book of Batman. I had not bought any Batman comics to that point, and I was pretty much later introduced into the Alan Grant and Norm Breyfogle run, which is still one of my favorite runs of all time on Batman, really. I grew up in my teens with that run. And later on with the Doug Moink, Kelly Jones run, to me, Norm Breyfogle and Kelly Jones were the definitive Batman artists from the 90s, despite the fact that many people felt that Kelly Jones' art was too dark for the Dark Knight, and his ears were too long and pointy. It kicked ass to me, people. It's real to me. At number 3 is Tom Beelan's True Story Swear to God. An exceptional series, exceptional comic. It started out as small newspaper strips from when Mr. Beeland wasn't living in California, and he was working in the newspaper, and he would put up his strip True Stories Swear to God. And eventually, one day, while he was doing a report on the opening of the Animal Kingdom, actually, he met Puerto Rican celebrity, really. She's hosted radio shows, TV shows, Lillian Garcia. And they met on a bus stop. And that really changed the lives for both those people. And Tom Beeland wound up moving from California to Puerto Rico to be with Lillian Garcia, and eventually he was able to publish a zine. I was never quite sure how that's pronounced, but it's those mini comics. And he made those mini comics that compiled different strips from the newspaper era when he worked there. And he would sell them in the local comic book stores, in the local bookstores in Guaynabo City, in San Juan. And I loved them. I picked them all up, except for number 9. For some reason, that one always escaped me. I don't know if it's number 9 or number 8, but I believe it's number 9. There was a number 9. I will find out. Believe me, I will. And anyway, he eventually did a full comic book of the story of how he met Lillian Garcia, which he titled True Story, Swear to God. And that was just the book that touches on just about every human emotion possible. And it's really the perfect book to just read and analyze in a way, to just know how to write dialogue, the pacing, the timing of the comedy, the drama. The art is wonderful too. And it's just a fantastic and inspiring story, because one of the stories within the story was when Lillian Garcia actually helped Tom Beeland publish his comics and pretty much coach him and tell him to give it a try and not give up and all that good stuff. And it's really a great motivational comic in that sense also. And it's just a wonderful comic. At number 2, it's actually a 3-way tie, and all 3 are Puerto Rican comics actually, and they are the comics that motivated me to push my own comic out here. It made me see these comics and it made me realize, like, Puerto Rican comics can be cool, they can look great, they can have solid stories, and they can just appeal to just about any genre also, even if it draws like different influences from Japan, Europe, American style, especially from the 90s. But really, every style copies or is derived from another anyway. I mean, Bambi pretty much inspired the whole anime movement in Japan back when Bambi first came out from Disney, because of the big eyes that the characters had and so on and so forth. But the 3 comics, the 3 local Puerto Rican comics that made me say, I can do this too, and it could come out pretty cool and at least find some kind of public, was Juan Lapaix's Esoteric Hunters from Dream Graphics Comics, Darion from Antonio Rivera from his studio Dual Reality Comics or Dual Reality Studios, and Rigo Jimenez's Levels Genesis, Viento Arcano, from, I think it was 22 Astral Doors at that time that he called his studios. But those are pretty much the 3 main Puerto Rican comic influences that really helped me launch my own comics as well. And the interesting thing is that both Juan Lapaix and Rigo Jimenez were pretty much a one-man band, in the sense that they pretty much did the art, the writing, everything on the comic. And Antonio Rivera, the writer and creator of Darion, he got to publish an Ashcan and a number 0 issue with artist Melvin Castro, which was a very solid artist, by the way. And also for issue number 1 of Darion, which was the last issue he had released, it featured the art of an artist, Puerto Rican artist that eventually became an artist in Top Cow and is currently penciling Red Hood and the Outlaws. Yes, Kenneth Rockeforth, in his humble beginnings, drew Darion issue number 1. And it was awesome. It kicked ass on so many levels. And it was pretty much ahead of its time, because in the time when Darion came out, local comics were mostly black and white, photocopied interiors with the more polished color cover, mini comic size. And when Darion came out, it was full color, glossy paper. It was set a very high standard. It set the bar. It broke the bar in terms of quality of arts and writing as well, to the point where it almost didn't look like a Puerto Rican comic. No knock or no offense to the Puerto Rican comic community at that time. At that time, it really looked like a Top Cow comic, but it was made in Puerto Rico, which was so awesome. And again, seeing the drive of Juan Lapaix with his Dream Graphic Studios and Esoteric Hunters and Fair also, which is a great character, very intriguing story as well. And Rico Jimenez with Nova Genesis, Viento Arcano with the cyberpunk elements mixed with the heavy metal comic influence and the European style as well. And it was just a blast. Those three comics inspired me, and I'm very proud and happy and humbled to say that I've been able to know these people for a few years now and call them my friends and mentors as well. So really, my comic never would have happened without Juan Lapaix, Antonio Rivera, and Rigo Jimenez. They're the ones that you have to blame for my comic. And now my nonsensical ramblings come to an end with the coveted #1 spot, which belongs to the Ray from DC Comics. Yes, the Ray from 1991-92. That was a 6-issue miniseries at first, where a little-known Joe Quesada was the artist, and it actually served as the springboard for him to gain more recognition for his art, because afterwards he did the Crucibles for Impact Comic, which was the final story arc that closed out that line of comics. After that, he did also Azrael, the Azrael miniseries that introduced John Paul Valley, that eventually became Batman for a while, or the infamous Azbats, as we like to call him. And he just grew on from there. But his beginnings was in The Ray, one of his first projects, and his art blew me away instantly. From the moment I opened that cover in the pharmacy, because this was back in those golden years where they used to sell comics in supermarkets and pharmacies, drugstores, pretty much everywhere. That was awesome. So I was a kid and I saw that cover of The Ray and it really intrigued me. And then I opened it to this fantastic splash page of The Ray displaying his power in the blaze of glory. And it just blew my mind. And I just bought it instantly. And when I got home, I read it from cover to cover, and I reread it and read it and read it until the cover right now is almost non-existent. It's almost fallen down, brittled into pieces, how many times I've read it. It's just an amazing comic, and I was just there month after month waiting for each issue, which just got so much better and so much better, and it just blew my mind, because up to that point I read the superhero comics and all that stuff, like, yeah, the noble hero comes in, saves the day, saves the cute girl, whatever, and is really the shining knight in the end and resolves everything. But then came The Ray to me, and he was a character that didn't want to be a superhero. He had one of the most powerful powers. I know it's redundant, but he had one of the most powerful powers in the DC universe at the time. The guy could explode into a supernova star if he wanted to, and he could create material matter from his powers. Like, he could create his own costume, his own clothes. He can even make life constructs of other people. Whoa! And he didn't want all that. He didn't. He just wanted a normal life, as much as it sucked. He preferred it because even though it sucked, it was his life. It was what he was used to being at that time. And that really changed my thought and my concept about superheroes and such. And it really changed my whole point of view, and to this day it's a really strong influence in my own works. And after a couple of years, the DC Comics gave the green light to make it into an ongoing series, which was actually even better than the miniseries. And it introduced another artist that would eventually become big in the late 90s, which was Howard Porter, who eventually went on to do that amazing run on the Justice League comics of the 90s along with Grant Morrison. So the Ray was pretty much responsible in a way to catapult the careers of Joe Quesada and Howard Porter. Wow. And the series pretty much picked off where the main series left, with the Ray Terrell, the protagonist, just pissed at having his powers, doesn't want it. Instead of using his light speed to get to work on time, he still goes on a bus to go to work and to move around everywhere. And he would spend his money on needless crap, and who doesn't identify with that? Being in the late teens, early 20s, strapped for cash, but you just had to have that stereo, damn it, or that big ass poster, even though you knew you would have to be eating bologna without bread for a week or something. And don't look at me, you've all done that at one point or another for something. It is a fact of life, people. But anyway, I digress. The Ray really is what catapulted me into wanting to make comics. It what made me into a real big comic book fan and converted me into a comic book junkie for many years, until recently, really a couple of years ago, I really kind of grew this interested in comics, or at least mainstream comics. But again, like Batman, which was one of my influential comics that made me want to do comics, has pretty much been drawing me back into the fold again. So it's an exciting time to be a comic book fan with the new DC 52, Spider Island, and all that good stuff. It's just, hopefully things will get better, because the artwork is amazing, the things that can be done nowadays with the artists, the colorists, different techniques. Even though sometimes it'll come late, at least the art is good enough to make you overlook that and be like, okay, at least it was worth the wait. You know, and it's just a great time to be a comic book fan again. And those were pretty much my favorites, and to this day, The Ray continues to be my all-time favorite comic.
As Lance Danger sits on his lonely throne in the middle of his kingdom of no one, he ponders about the question he's been asked many times about a certain wall-crawling arachnid they say Warlord is a lot like. Well, my friends, that is a story for another day.